What type of market environment do you expect these ETFs to do well in or not so well in?
So if I think I'm going to talk in broad sense here. So when I think about dividend type strategies, they're higher yielding, so that means chances are a company is more stable, mature, higher quality in nature because they can sustain that dividend payment. So what we've seen historically is dividends tend to do very well late in the cycle and in recessionary periods, but they also do very well early in the recovery. And why is that? If you think about dividends in general, we tend to see a value bias. So they tend to be a little bit cheaper than the broad market. Anytime you're dividing dividend by price, earnings over price, which is a P ratio, or anything by P, we tend to lean a little bit towards the left on the value spectrum. So that leads to the strong performance early in the recovery. And also what we've seen is central bank behavior. So they tend to cut rates a little bit into the recovery until they see strong signals that the actual economy is recovering. So they also get that lift early in recovery of markets. And then what we've seen is in the mid-markets is there's no evidence of outperformance or underperformance. So if you take an investor that has a long-term approach, you can reinvest those dividends. And what we've seen, we talked about a little bit earlier, is over long time periods, dividends have a history of outperforming. But what we like to say is factors work over time, but not all the time. So you can also use them kind of in a tactical view. So if you have a view where we are in the market cycle, whether it's mid-cycle, late cycle, pending recession, you could start to implement these types of strategies to take those market views from an asset allocation standpoint. So we're pretty excited in the sense that I think we're delivering on dividends in a diversified manner. The combination of high yields and low management fees, very attractive mix. And then lastly, all of these ETFs pay monthly distributions. So if you're in that aging demographic and you're relying on a source of income, all of these products spit out the dividends that they accrue at the end of every month. So great source of income as well.
I think that's been a big question for a long time is where to find yield and how to do it effectively. Andrew, from your standpoint or from your vantage point in the industry, what do you think, what do you see as the future of ETFs in Canada?
Oh, I'm excited. Yeah. We have 750 ETFs, give or take, right now. Some people would say that's high relative to the U.S., but we have a lot more currency-neutral products up here in Canada because we're so exposed to U.S. dollar versus the Canadian dollar that I think that's a little bit more important in the Canadian landscape. But I think it's going to be interesting. We've already seen some evolution into some niche areas. We've also seen an explosion into the active space. So if you think about it, Canada is kind of on the forefront of actively managed ETFs. So we started Smart Beta. We were one of the leading countries in that space. Over the past couple of years, we started to see growth of active fixed income space. So I'm really excited to see what comes next because Canada tends to be on the innovation front when it comes to ETFs. So we actually have the first ETF in the world, which now is XIU. So I'm really excited to see what happens next from an innovation standpoint because we do have new categories coming to market. The OSC is looking at liquid alternatives. I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for the ETF space just from an operating standpoint. But from an innovation standpoint, I think ultimately Canada will be at the forefront.
Yeah, I think as a marketplace, I think Canada might end up being the envy of the ETF world.
I agree with that. First active management out there, first ETF in the world. We've also done some pretty interesting stuff on thematic type products. So we've seen a big evolution there in the Canadian market. So don't really know what's in store, but I know it's going to be exciting because Canada tends to be at the forefront there.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you very much for your time today. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Pierre. That was great.